Okay.
Yeah, good.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bob and Mike. I appreciate the invitation to present to you all today. This is my virtual webinar as part of our new normal, so I appreciate folks joining us today. Protection and restoration initiatives involved with. First off, a little overview of protection. Program is and the detail about our program, our program. Some funding sources we're receiving as well as some of the department of settlement. I'll talk about some of the issues we're doing with the sediment, and then some of the planning we're doing in coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as with some of our sister state agencies. So now I'm going to give you a little background on the GLO. Let me read this verbatim. The Texas General Land Office primarily serves the school children, veterans, and the environment of Texas. The agency does so by preserving our history, maximizing state revenue through innovative administration, and through the prudent stewardship of state lands and natural resources. To put it another way, the General Land Office, one of our primary missions is to generate revenue for the Permanent School Fund to help fund public education in the state of Texas. We do that primarily by leasing of state assets and collecting royalties from the extraction of state-owned minerals such as oil and gas. And then leasing of state-owned submerged lands is one example when we lease land for uses for piers and boat docks and other such purposes. Some history on the GLO. We were established in 1836 by the Republic of Texas as a means to pay the veterans of the Texas Revolution for their service. They were paid in land, and by virtue, we were adopted into the state of Texas, and the state became part of the Union in 1845. And by virtue of that, we are the oldest Texas state agencies. We are the manager of state-owned lands. We manage about 13 million acres, which consists of quite a few public lands, acres of public lands out in West Texas, where we do a lot of oil and gas production, and the tidally influenced land and the bay estuaries offshore, the out to approximately 10 miles offshore. Some of the GLO programs, we're a multi-state agency. We are the curator of the land records for the state of Texas, including historical maps, as well as copies of land grant documents. And I would urge you, if you're ever coming to Austin and going to tour the Capitol complex, give our archives and records folks a call. If you're interested in a tour, they can give you a tour of our collections and take you to our climate control repository, where we keep a lot of our historical records. Other aspects of the GLO is the asset management enhancement, again, generating revenue off of state-owned assets. Energy resources, which is tasked with collecting oil and gas royalties. We also house the Veterans Land, which gives out low-interest loans to U.S. veterans for their service. And the if you're interested in a loan for land, please check out the Veterans Land and curator of the Alamo, and we're actively involved with doing some enhancement to the grounds of the Alamo for the public to enhance the Shrine of Texas Liberty. Also, since about 2011, we've housed the Community Development and Revitalization Program. This is a program that I'll touch on towards the end of my presentation that distributes U.S. housing and urban development disaster recovery funds to help with the local communities recover after significant events such as wildfires and hurricanes and such. GLO is also the agency that's the state on-scene coordinator for coastal oil spills. We coordinate with the U.S. Coast Guard as our federal partners on coastal oil spills. And then the section that I work in is the Coastal Resources Division. I'll go into a little more detail there. A little more about why the GLO is associated with the Texas coast. Some background on the Texas coast is we have about 367 miles of Gulf shoreline, more than 3,300 miles of bay shoreline, and the 18 counties that make up the Texas coast out of the 254 counties of the state represent about 26% of the state's population. As I mentioned, we've been around since 1836 as managers of state-owned submerged lands, and we're the lead agency responsible for coastal management, beach and dune protection, coastal erosion response, coastal oil spill, and disaster recovery. Going into a little more detail about some of our coastal programs, the Coastal Management Program, which was enacted by the Texas Legislature in 1997 under the Federal Coastal Management Coastal Management Program is funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And part of the aspect of our CMP program is that we now have the authority to review federal actions within the Texas coastal zone to ensure that it's consistent with the goals and policies of our Texas Coastal Management Plan. For instance, we review U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permits for particular actions that are occurring on the coast to make sure that they're not going to adversely impact some of the natural resource areas and wildlife on the coast. Also, as part of our program, we award approximately $2.2 million annually in grants for coastal natural hazards response, critical area enhancement, public access, waterfront revitalization, permit streamlining assistance, government coordination, and quality improvements. I urge you to check out the GLO's website. If you are interested in some of these categories under our CMP program, realize this is really short notice, but for our 2021 grant cycle, the pre-proposals are due tomorrow at 5 p.m. with the full proposals due in October. So if you are interested in our grant program, please look at the CP website. One of the big programs that we're administering is the Coastal Erosion Planning and Response Act program, what we call Kepler. I was actually hired in 1999 as one of the original project managers in our Kepler program. It was the first time the state legislature had dedicated funding to help address the growing problem of coastal erosion and habitat loss on the Texas coast. Through Kepler, we partner with local, state, federal, and non-governmental entities, and we do most of the projects are run through GLO. We have full of service providers, a lot of them with expertise in coastal engineering, and we'll basically issue work orders under IDI contracts for engineers to partners to the projects, get engineered and permitted, and then go through to construction. For beachfront projects, the cost share is 75% Kepler, 25% from our partners. For other projects such as marsh restoration, shore protection, bird island, and habitat restoration, the cost share is 60% Kepler, 40% for other projects. We have approximately $14 million of state funding that we can match with our partner funding over the course of our annual funding cycles. Since the state legislature meets every 2 years, we get our funding chunks in 2-year increments. And had a struggle for 20 years that Kepler has been around as far as never having a reliable, dedicated funding source. We've been funded through general revenue. We've been funded through our oil spill response programs for a couple of cycles. We've also shared funding with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. But in the 2019 legislative session, the legislature dedicated a portion of the hotel occupancy tax from coastal counties to help fund our Kepler program. Some of the types of Kepler projects that we have, we do beach and dune restoration. We do a lot of marsh restoration, shoreline protection. I'll get into a little more about what we do regarding beneficial use of dredge material. We do structure relocations and debris removal to get derelict material off of the beaches and out of the coastal zone. We also do sandstone and monitor shoreline change along the Texas coast. We do that in coordination with the University of Texas through economic geology using mineral-based LiDAR systems. I mentioned beneficial use of dredge material, BUDM, one of our flagship projects down at South Padre Island. Brazos Santiago Pass, which in this picture is towards the top of the image on the left, which is the Brownsville Ship Channel where it passes south of South Padre Island. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for maintenance dredging of Brazos Santiago Pass to make sure that it's safe for deep draft navigation. And normally, traditionally, they would collect the material from the channel and dispose of it in a dedicated several miles offshore. Unfortunately, when they put it in that offshore placement area, it takes it out of the active beach and dune system where we're experiencing erosion. And so what we do is we coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers where they agree that since they have to do navigation dredging regardless, since it's their mission, they will agree to pay the base costs that it would normally cost them to do the navigational dredging. And if somebody can come up with the additional costs to for the extra equipment, extra fuel, and extra time to material and place it up here on the upper part of the beach where they're experiencing erosion, they will direct their contractors to conduct that operation for us. And here's an aerial view of that. Again, Brazos Santiago Pass is down here at the bottom of the picture. They have designated some alternative dredge material placement areas. That's what DMPA stands for. Down here in the Cameron County Visible Park. And DMPA number 5 is the one further north. And that is along the vertically eroding portion of the South Padre Island shoreline. As I mentioned, the Corps covers their base planning or base plan dredge cost, and then a combination of the land office, Kepler funds, local funding from the South Padre and Cameron County. We pay that incremental cost to get the sand on the beach. Another funding source that has been very beneficial for us is from the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act called GOESA. GOESA was passed Congress in 2006. First, it allowed revenue sharing with the oil producing states and the feds with revenues generated from oil and gas in outer continental shelf waters offshore the producing states. It's been a very big boom to Texas as far as funding wise. It really ramped up in 2019. The allocation was $46 million. And with an additional $11 million going directly to the 18 coastal counties. It does have some specific authorized uses such as coastal protection, conservation, and restoration. And GLO using it to enhance our Kepler and CMP grant programs. As I mentioned, Kepler has a required cost share that the legislature required to collect from our local partners. That has been pretty difficult for some of our partners, especially our local municipalities, to come up with the required partner match. And so we've been using basic funds to help supply that partner match to get some of these badly needed projects to construction. Another funding source is coming from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill settlement and the resulting Restore Act. And pardon me, I don't have the acronym for the Restore Act up there, but it's a legislation that was passed after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And let me remind us that this did result from an unfortunate tragedy that occurred on April 20th of 2010. There were unfortunately 11 lives lost. It was the worst Gulf oil spill, one of the worst environmental disasters in the Gulf of Mexico history. But from the settlement and the administrative and civil penalties that resulted from this tragedy, there was a natural resource damage assessment settlement regarding the ecological damages that were assessed from this, and approximately $8.8 billion was assessed and agreed upon with the responsible parties in that settlement. And of that $8.8 billion, $230 million is coming to Texas over a 15-year period. Another almost $2.6 billion was directed to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the foundation that was created by Congress to aggregate restoration funding. And $2.6 billion was dedicated to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and a little over $200 million is coming to Texas. And then the Restore Act allocated the clean water penalties that is being directed towards Gulf Coast restoration and economic recovery. Some of the restoration goals coming from these funding sources are to restore and conserve habitats, restore water quality, protect coastal and marine resources, enhance recreational opportunities, and provide monitoring and adaptation to make sure that these projects are achieving the end goals that they were intended to. In 2017, the Texas Natural Resource Damage Assessment Implementation Group published our first restoration plan. This is the bulletized list, or the list of the 13 projects, combination of restoration projects, and acquisition were included in this 2017 restoration plan. And the yellow arrows indicate the projects that the various trustee agencies requested the GLO spearhead the engineering, design, planning, and monitoring. The big projects that's coming out of that is the McFadden Beach and Dune restoration. This project is located down in Jefferson County. Jefferson County is one of the farthest southeast counties in Texas, and it's also home to a very large national wildlife refuge, the McFadden National Wildlife Refuge. That beach has been experiencing significant erosion. Erosion threatens the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, as well as some significant oil and gas infrastructure, habitats of the beach. And so the combination of Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damage Assessment Funds, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Kepler and Gomesa funds, we've paid almost $70 million to restore approximately 17 miles of the Jefferson County shoreline. We're using about 3.4 million cubic yards of sand, and that sand is actually coming from an offshore sediment borrow site. If you're not that familiar with the Texas coast, we really don't have that much sand available on the coast. Most of the sand that you see is in a thin veneer that is collected along the Gulf shoreline, the bottom coast of clays and silts. The common thread that most of our restoration projects have is that they all need sediments. And so one of the initiatives that we're undertaking to help bolster our restoration efforts is the GLO Sediment Management Plan. This plan will encompass conducting offshore sediment investigations, doing both geophysical surveys, such as seismic, sonar, and then tech investigations to actually pull borings to sample potential targets identified during the geophysical phase. So further coordinating with the Corps of Engineers on the beneficial use of dredge material. We're conducting studies to look at the sediment budget and longshore sediment management, on the where it's accreting, what are the flux rates of sediment, and how it syncs up with some of the management activities, different channel dredging, navigation structures that are disrupting sediment transport. We're trying to get a better picture on how sediment is flowing and how we can better enhance that and how we can best enhance it for restoration purposes. We're also collaborating with the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management on their offshore sediment inventory. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, called BOEM, it was formerly the U.S. Mineral Management Service, and they're responsible for the leasing of federally owned minerals outside in OCS, Outer Continental Shelf territory. And we've been working with them to try to develop a seamless inventory of potential sediment sources, both in state waters and federal waters. Additionally, we're also trying to identify resource conflicts of sediment sources. As I mentioned, when we do find sand sources out in the Gulf of Mexico, it is very rare, and so those are very highly valued areas when we do find them. We're finding that there are conflicts with some of the existing oil and gas infrastructure and other infrastructure offshore that we're having to work around. Another aspect of our sediment management planning that we are developing Texas master plan for the beneficial use of dredge material. This is in conjunction with Ducks Unlimited, firm of Anchor QA, as well as Source Consult and Texas Department of Transportation. They are the non-federal sponsor of the Corps of Engineers to maintain the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, which is all the way from up in Louisiana to Florida. And so TxDOT is responsible for the Texas portion of that. And so dredging is the high cost maintenance requirements with the navigation channels, not only intercoastal waterway, but our deep draft channels. And so trying to identify where and when dredging is taking place and where it may be in the proximity to a need for restoration, and linking up these dredging projects to hopefully reduce the cost of dredging as well as reduce the cost of restoration. And so we're in the process of developing this Texas master plan to restoration sites so we can link up with known dredging projects. I mentioned the conflicts we have with oil and gas infrastructure. This slide's kind of dark. It might be a little hard to interpret, but let me just say that Texas is on the far left-hand side of this image. This image is mainly occupied with Louisiana, but I would draw your attention to the lighter colored blocks. Those are federal lease blocks that are out in outer continental shelf waters. And these are blocks, the Ocean Energy Management leases for oil and gas production. The entire Gulf is covered by this grid of blocks, but a lot of the ones you see here are ones where significant resource known superficial shoals or buried paleo river channels have been identified with substantial usable set of resources. And you can also see overlay on this is the spider web of pipelines. So we have to work around these pipelines. We have to give buffer on each side to make sure that we compromise the pipelines or withdraw too much material close to them where we may experience failure. And so also one thing that's happening out in the Gulf of Mexico is that a lot of the equipment that is there, it's identified service life. So there's a lot of decommissioning of oil and gas platforms as well as pipelines. True ways of pipelines is to flush it out with seawater, clean up the insides, and tap the ends, and just to abandon it in place without pulling it up. However, we're now discovering that as we're doing more investigations offshore for sand resources, to decommission pipelines in place is becoming problematic. And so we're in the process of working with the oil and gas industry to try to develop policies so that it's not too burdensome on industry, but will allow them to remove their infrastructure when we do identify and that could be restoration. At this point, I'd like to turn to some of the planning efforts that we're undertaking. The first one is the Galveston Bay Coastal Storm Risk Management Study, SRM, that the GLO is in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers. We've actually moved out of the feasibility study phase and are now moving into pre-construction engineering and development. This project essentially had three components to it. The first two components were to take a look at the coastal storm risk management, those known as hurricane protection systems, the levee systems around Port in Brazoria County and around Port Arthur in Jefferson County. They have existing coastal storm risk management system in place. However, due to increasing sea level rise and regional and local subsidence, those systems have become somewhat compromised. And so we'll be working with the Corps and those local levee districts to help build up the size of their levees, go in and replace eye walls with T walls that are much more substantial and sustainable. And then the third component, besides Freeport, Port Arthur, is Orange County. And Orange County is pictured in the image on the right. And Orange County is at the top of Sabine Lake. The Sabine River is at the far right of this image. Louisiana is just on the side of that. But Orange County has taken some significant damage and impacts to infrastructure from a number of hurricanes, including especially Hurricane Ike, which devastated the town of Bridge City. And so they do not currently have a coastal storm risk management system. And so what you see with the blue line is the proposed, I believe, 23-mile set of levees and flood walls to protect the lower part of Orange County from storm surge. For all three components, the total cost is approximately $3.9 billion. And the cost share is 65% federal and 35% non-federal. So the state of Texas is working with folks to help come up with the necessary funding for the non-federal cost share. The next study I'd like to talk about is, again, this is a GLO Army Corps partner project, and it's the Coastal Texas Protection and Restoration Study. This is a combination of coastal storm risk management as well as ecosystem restoration. We're currently going through the draft feasibility study and environmental impact study process. The feasibility study and the EIS are slated to be complete in 2021, possibly slipping into 2022. And some of the coastal CSRM systems we're looking at are levees and flood walls, surge gates, structure raising and relocation, and also the installation of pump stations to pump out excess water when these systems are under stress. Some of the ecosystem restoration measures that we're also looking at are including marsh restoration, beach restoration, oyster reef, island restoration, also the creation of waters, living shorelines, also hydrologic restoration. Here's kind of the basic of why the study is image coast showing the different levels of elevation that you see. You see in red are the areas that are below 1.5 meters, in blue is 1.5 to 3.5 meters, and then the rest is everything above 3.5 meters. On the left side, you see the various federal agency seawall provisions through 2085. And these vary based upon the different ice melting scenarios that are out there. But the bottom line is that we were very exposed, and we have a lot of infrastructure as well as habitat at risk. And so this study is aiming to try to address some of those concerns. The big component, especially from the coastal storm risk management aspect of this, is something to protect the greater Houston and Gibson Bay vicinity. As many of you are aware, the Houston-Galveston area is home to one of the biggest petrochemical complexes in the world, supplies a large percentage of our national GMP and petroleum products. And so we came really close to taking a significant hit during Hurricane Ike back in 2008. You can see on my cursor, Hurricane Ike came just over Bolivar Roads and over the western tip of Bolivar Peninsula. Had that storm been 10 to 20 miles further to the south, the estimates are that the storm surge would have significantly impacted all the industry in Texas City, as well as along the Houston Ship Channel and upwards towards downtown Houston, as well as devastating the residential communities along the west side of the bay. And so some alternatives that we're looking at to address the continued and growing tropical storm threat to this area is some kind of barrier that's extending from the community of High Island up here in far eastern Galveston County extending down Bolivar Peninsula to Bolivar Road and Ship Channel, constructing a large set of navigation surge gates that would be open for most of the time, but closed whenever the area is threatened by storm surge. Then seeing the existing Galveston seawall, constructing a ring levee around downtown Galveston, and then continuing a levee system of some sort toward San Luis Pass at the far southwestern end of Galveston County. The current alignment of what we call the coastal spine, which would be this levee system, is basically creating a fortified dune system on the existing beach and dune area and connecting up with the surge gates across Bolivar Roads and the Houston Ship Channel. Further up into the bay, even though we would block the hundreds of the surge coming in that normally flows over Bolivar Peninsula and Galveston Island during large hurricanes, we would still generate a pretty significant surge within Galveston. So we would have some smaller gates along Clear Creek and Dixon Bayou, and then possible non-structural measures such as locations within these areas that are growing along the western side of Galveston Bay. Some of the ecosystem restoration projects that we're looking at is, again, Gulf Beach restoration along this area within the Galveston area, as well as marsh restoration along the bay and estuary side of things. Further down, shoreline protection along the intercoastal waterway, marshes, and Gulf Beach restoration. Further down this area, down toward Calhoun County and Matagorda Bay, looking at Killer Bay restoration, as well as some shoreline protection restoration. A large restoration project down here in Corpus Christi Bay and Redfish Bay to protect a large seagrass and marsh complex, and then bird rookery and shoreline protection down around Port Mansfield. Not shown in this project, or not shown on this map, is a large component down in Cameron County to provide additional shore protection for Cameron County and South Puget Island. So that kind of sums it up for the GLO Army Corps Coastal Texas study. Another initiative that I'd like to direct your attention to is a state-funded effort called the Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan. And this is a master planning effort spearheaded by the GLO. Our first version was published in 2017, which was mainly focused on ecosystem restoration. We revised it again in 2019 to bring in more of the infrastructure and merging both gray and green infrastructure. Both natural base as well as structural solutions, and we're adopting a multiple lines of defense approach. And not only just a bulkhead, you think a bulkhead is needed, is where you can provide marsh to buffer some of the storm surge impact, build up your natural resources with dunes, build up bird islands, and then protect critical can't be relocated, and using this multiple line of defense to hopefully have a more sustainable defenses. A lot of the provisions that were developed, the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan, were developed through local expertise and stakeholders. With technical advisory committees along the coast, and these were assembled using local experts, elected officials, concerned citizens, resource agency folks, discuss what the issues of concern were and to identify potential solutions. And in this plan, we've essentially divided the coast into 4 planning regions. Here on the left, you see the map showing Region 1, which is coast. Region 2 is essentially Matagorda County down to Calhoun County. Region 3 includes
think we lost Ray for a second, but he is hopping right back in. Hang tight.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got dropped. Or are we back on?
You are back on, but you need to reshare your screen, please.
Okay. All right. I apologize about that. Let's get back in here. So, okay. Here.
Your sound is breaking up, Ray.
Okay. How's it now?
That seems better at the moment.
Okay. All righty. All right. Let's keep our fingers crossed here, and let me try to pick back up. I mentioned we have the 4 planning regions on the coast, and we're developing an adaptive resiliency plan for the changing conditions, increasing storm and sea level rise, and we're going to use this as a tool to communicate the environmental and economic value of the Texas state and national audiences. One of our primary focus audiences is not only the public of Texas, but also the state.
Ray, you're gone again.
All right, it seems like I keep getting dropped. Bob, can you hear me?
Breaking up.
Okay, better now? How's it now?
That comment was good. That was good.
Okay, all righty. Well, let's. I'll keep forging ahead, and we'll roll with the punches as they come up. So, this little diagram here is kind of busy, but it basically diagrams the approach that we're taking to identify the specific economic, social, and natural drivers, how they interact with the pressures of natural processes and human activity that result in various issues of concern that we experience on the Texas coast, from altered habitat, erosion, to infrastructure from storm surge, damage, impacts to quality and quantity, and the abandonment and
Come back on.
it's kind of a recurring problem. I apologize about my connection here. Bob, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep going through this. How's the reception right now?
It's good. Share the screen.
Okay. Okay. See my screen. All right. Okay, but resulting from this process, we identified individual projects, and then through monitoring and adaptive management, we're continuing to monitor the actions that we put in place to make sure that they're achieving our intended results. This little cartoon here just shows some of the issues of concern, shoreline erosion, water quality impacts, coastal flood damage.
Ray, your screen is not shared.
Okay, all right, hang on. You see here, back there, share screen. Okay, hang on.
You think it's your internet connection or what?
It probably is. I'm on a Wi-Fi that normally works pretty good. This. Okay, can you see my screen, Bob?
It says you started sharing, but it hasn't come up yet. There it is now.
Okay. All right, okay. All right, we'll try to rifle through the end of the year. These projects that we've identified for natural resources. I've already gone over some of these types of evacuation routes, critical infrastructure and utilities, and monitoring the conditions of storm risk, sea level rise, and monitoring development on the coast. We see an increase in population. I mentioned the technical advisory committees that we formed. Here are the form these. We lean heavily on the tax to inform us as we go through this process and get feedback from them. And we, instead of prioritizing projects from, you know, a top number one,
I think we've
Lost him again.
Alrighty, hang on, Bob. Okay, Bob.
you're kind of breaking. Let's see, now the picture's on.
Okay, alrighty. How's the audio now?
At the moment, it sounds good.
All right. Well, let's hang with for next few moments. So, but basically, the tier 1 projects are the ones that most support addressing the issues of concern. The tier 2 projects are ones that need a little more development, and the tier 3 projects are the ones that really aren't very well developed at all, and that we're needs more work on. Okay, we're also funding some academic studies under the Resiliency Master Plan. We're running the sea level affecting marshes model, and this is incorporating sea level change to try to predict some of the landscape changes that we think we'll see over about the next century or so, identifying where marshes can and can't migrate, where you know, development trends can be altered to facilitate marsh migration. We're also, on top of our sea level rise models, we're running the Army Corps' ASCE storm surge model to try to look at what increasing sea level rise would do to the impact of storm surges. And then we're also trying to better predict some of the economic losses with future storms and increased storm surge. We're also using this to guide policy and organizational improvements, not only within GLO, but some of our sister agencies, such as TxDOT, is incorporating the master plan into some of their planning efforts as they're looking at some of their transportation systems close to the coast. And we're also using it to help guide some of our approach to the legislature and some of the tools for the public to use to look at some of their vulnerabilities on the coast. I urge you to take a look at the GLO's website for some of the project information sheets for some of the tier 1 projects that you see here, and some of these maps on the left. And you can also visit our interactive project database to learn more about our master plan and some of our planned activities. Essentially, going back to this framework is you know, planning, implementation, maintaining, and monitoring, and then, you know, making this one big do loop to monitor implementation as we move forward. I mentioned the master plan came out last year in 2019. Our next update will be in 2023, and we intend to continue to revisit the issues of concern and the potential projects every 4 years as conditions change and as we implement some of these projects. And so urge you to stay tuned and feel free to get involved if some of our actions happen to concern some of your interests. As I mentioned, we're using this for public outreach. You know, we're engaging the public. We're trying to educate them and trying to get them more involved. And we're trying to help our local communities make long-term decisions as it relates to sea level rise, environmental impacts, and resiliency for storm preparedness. Some other plans that I will touch on concern our community development revitalization program. And this is the portion of GLO that administers U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development mitigation funding and disaster recovery program. The GLO is currently coming out with a mitigation action plan to identify where we'll spend money, and there's about $4.3 billion that the HUD has in Texas for this mitigation plan, which is very significant. And about 100 million of it is being dedicated to the Texas coast. It funds both structural and non-structural projects, as well as funding various mitigation projects and partnerships. And you see some of the programs that are listed here on the left. A lot of it is associated with some of the hurricanes, specifically Hurricane Harvey, and addressing some of the coastal resiliency that was exposed during that and other hurricane events. But the primary purpose is to reduce the risk to impacts from future natural disasters such as hurricanes and wildfires. Another issue is the Hurricane Harvey State Action Plan. This was a direct appropriation from Congress to HUD as a result of Hurricane Harvey. We were given about $5.67 billion of HUD Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. Specifically, $1.2 billion dedicated to Harris County, and then another $1.275 billion directly to the city of Houston. It helps fund assistance for reconstruction, infrastructure repair, buyouts in high-risk areas, especially the more flood-prone areas. Helps stimulate economic revitalization. Helps support regional and state planning. And so that basically sums it up as far as the for protection and restoration. And I'd like to point you in the direction, if you're interested in contracting with the GLO, especially from an engineering firm interest. I mentioned as I was talking about Erosion, GLO maintains a pool of professional service providers, many engineering firms for various specializations. Our current pool of indefinite deliverable, indefinite quantity contracts extend through August 30th. We're about to start the planning process to ramp up to rekindle those contracts and bring in new firms into the fold starting in September of 2021. And so the request for qualification for engineering services will go out in early 2021. We're looking for multiple specialties from planning to coastal engineering to engineering and design and geotechnical and quite a few different disciplines. So I encourage you to look out for that RFQ 2021. And I direct you to a webpage called Texas Smart Buy that is maintained by the State Comptroller Organization, and it's basically the go-to guide for state procurement. There is a website, it's techsmartbuy.com, and if you're not already registered, I encourage you to get registered for the centralized master bidders list. And what this is, it's a service that the Comptroller's office offers, and I believe it's about $70 a year to register. And you go through the registration process, and you would enter your, if you work for an engineering firm, you would enter your firm's specialization, be it survey or structural engineering or what have you. And you click all the various boxes, and then once you're registered, you would then receive email notifications for solicitations that the state puts out that may pertain to your specialties that you might be interested in submitting qualifications for. And so our IDIQ RFQ will be solicited on Smart Buy through what's called the Electronic State Business Daily, which is where all solicitations are posted electronically. And so register, so you'll receive notifications. There's also a way to, if you are HUB certified, to signify that in Texas Smart Buy. And it's also a way to, if you're looking for HUB subcontracting opportunities, that is one route that you can go to try to find that resource as well. So I thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I do apologize about the technical difficulties during the middle presentation. Hope it wasn't too distracting, but at this point, I'd be glad to entertain any questions. And so Bob and Mike, I'm going to stop sharing. And
right. Thank you, Ray. Yeah, sorry for the sound problems and the losing of the connections, but hopefully people were able to see with the graphics that were on the screen and get the message. There are a few questions. One is, what type of protection will be provided for Texas coast? And then they say groin, seawall, breakwater, jetty.
Okay. It all depends upon the location and what the existing geomorphology is at that location. In general, for the big one that I was showing, for the Houston Galveston area, we're basically looking at a levee system along the existing beach and dune system, basically an enhanced protected dune. In other areas, such as in high urban areas like, say, the city of Galveston, we're probably going to use what's known as T-walls, which are vertical concrete reinforced walls with a substantial foundation to them to resist the water flow. There are other areas where, you know, maybe there's just a shoreline of a navigation channel where we're trying to protect some eroding marsh. We may install a small breakwater, what's otherwise known as a living shoreline, that will break some of the wave energy, but still allow some of the natural habitat to exist and thrive back behind them. In some cases, along the beach where we have very high rates of erosion, for example, in the village of Surfside down near the Freeport Ship Channel is one of our highest eroding areas. We are looking at installing groins, but our preference would be to install soil protection such as beach restoration and dune restoration where possible.
All right, the next question deals with how do you detect level of pollution in the oceans? And then they say by GIS or by what?
Well, there are a series of monitoring programs that the state maintains. The Texas Water Development Board maintains a water quality network in conjunction with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality within the Bays and Estuaries program. And then GLO maintains a program called Beach Watch. And this is where we have contractors that every few days take water samples from the public beaches, and we're mainly looking for potential E. coli contamination and that tends to occur after heavy rain events where we get a lot of flushing off the landscape, and we get bacteria, and we're in the surf zone offshore as well as in our bays and estuaries. And so I would urge you to go take a look at our website for Beach Watch. And that is a GIS-based system, and you can identify those areas and look for where there may be compromised water quality. And then, okay, and there's I guess a follow-up to that. Can you describe the coastal monitoring program implemented by GLO related to coastal erosion, sea level rise, etc.? Okay. We, through our Kepler program, our coastal erosion program, we contract with the University of Texas Bureau of Economic Geology. And they periodically, about every 3 to 5 years, they'll survey the entire coast of Texas using airplane-based LIDAR, laser ranging and detection system. And using the LIDAR, they can detect the elevation of the beach. And by basically monitoring a given contour along the beach, and monitoring the change of that contour over time, we can generate shoreline change rates, the rate of erosion or the rate of accretion. For sea level rise, we use the NOAA tide gauge system that we have various tide gauges positioned all on the coast, and by long-term monitoring those tide gauges, we're able to track sea level rise.
All right, Ray, and another question deals with, do you get involved with controlling plastic pollution into the oceans?
To some degree, another aspect which I didn't mention, I should throw in to my presentation, is that GLO has the Adopt a Beach program, where we partner with citizen volunteers up and down the coast, and we have an annual fall cleanup and a spring cleanup where we bring volunteers to the beach, and different groups are dedicated to different sections of beach that they'll pick up pollution, and they catalog that pollution and weigh it. And of course, plastic pollution is the overwhelming amount that we see. However, at this point, we're not a regulatory agency as far as controlling the rate of plastic pollution, but plastic pollution is becoming a very significant issue, because plastic really never goes away. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces and gets incorporated into the marine organisms that live in those impacted areas.
Let's take two more questions. The one deals with what are the various heptathlons of coastal reconstruction, and I wasn't sure what heptathlons meant other than with the Olympics, but it's mentioned that it means the interested areas. So what are the interested areas of coastal reconstruction?
Okay. Well, primarily it's where people live. Only like that because in areas, a lot of areas where we have erosion, it's a process. However, when there are significant development and infrastructure, it's a major problem. We also identify areas of sensitive habitats, marshes, which are basically the nursery grounds for a lot of the marine organisms that inhabit the basin estuaries as well as the ocean. And so that's why we do a lot of marsh restoration and protection of sensitive areas. We also do bird island reconstruction to try to bolster the populations of some of the threatened and endangered bird populations on the coast.
Okay, and then the final question before we conclude is, what is a coastal hazard risk management adaptation plan?
I guess probably the best way to say that would be, that's basically what our coastal resiliency master plan is by identifying the issues of concern, coastal erosion, water quality impacts. Those are some of the hazards that we're identifying. Storm surge is one of the big hazards that we've identified. And then finding ways to adapt to that, finding some actions that would decrease the future impacts from those hazards that get incorporated to the plan, and then from the planning get incorporated to specific projects to go and address those. For example, if if we identify from storm surge that a major hurricane evacuation route may be vulnerable, then maybe we can go in and raise the elevation of that road, provide additional protection to mitigate the future impacts, so that evacuation route can be used safely by the people that need to use it when the time comes.
All right, and then one more came in through the chat. How successful are we in restoring water quality?
I think we are making progress. It is a challenge with the increasing development that we have, but through the various monitoring networks, like I mentioned, the Water Development Board and Commission on Environmental Quality, in conjunction with the feds, the Environmental Protection Agency, we've identified where impacted watersheds exist, and we've been able to target areas to try to address non-point source pollution, build wetlands that help further improve water quality downstream of water treatment facilities. And so it is still a big challenge, but we are making positive inroads in a lot of areas in coastal water quality.
All right, thank you very much, Ray, for the presentation. And again, I apologize for the losing the connection.